Chuck Baldwin is one who really needs no introduction to this group. I'm sure you all know Chuck, and I'm amazed. I've had several people who actually told me that they want to combine this coming to the National Committee meeting with a trip across over into Montana so that they can listen to Chuck in person tomorrow. So may have a few visitors. Sounds like you're going to have a few visitors at your fellowship meeting tomorrow. So anyway, Chuck Baldwin Live, recently moved to the Flathead area of Montana, starting a new Free State project there of sorts. And I'll let him tell as much about that as he like. If you read his columns, you understand. You've read why he made that move with his family. Sounds like an exciting proposition, and boy, there's a lot of exciting things that he has to tell us. So without more, Chuck Baldwin.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much, Jim. And thank you, Constitution Party, for allowing me to come and speak before you again today. And thank you especially for the great honor and the privilege that you gave me in 2008 of representing you before the American people as your candidate for President of the United States. I still and will always consider that one of the highlights of my life, and I am extremely honored to stand before you once again, an honor that I do not and never will take for granted. Thank you very much. I was going to begin by inviting folks to come over if you were able to, if your time and schedule would allow you. It's about a three and a half hour drive from here to Kalispell, Montana. And we start our services Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock. And we are on Mountain Time. This is Pacific Time here, so it's an hour ahead of the time here in Idaho. But if your schedule allows you to come over and be with us tomorrow, we'll be meeting at the the Hilton Garden Inn Conference Center, which is on the main street going north and south, Highway 93, just about a mile south of town. If you're able to come over and fellowship with us tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you would meet an energetic, inspired, enthusiastic crowd of patriot Christians that are literally making a wonderful difference in the Flathead Valley. And we started our fellowship in January, about the end of January. So we are, not quite 9 months old or so. And already our fellowship has grown to every Sunday, somewhere between 150 and 200 people are assembling with us. And people are moving to the Flathead Valley from all over the United States of America. We've had literally dozens of families already move to the Flathead, and there are scores of families more that are on the way. We have a man in our fellowship who has taken it upon himself to kind of be the coordinator of the people that are moving to the area, and he told me just the other day that at last count, he has over 150 people that he's right now talking with who are in the process of trying to get to the Flathead Valley. That's how many people are moving to this part of the country. And I can tell you this, those of you that are from Idaho, that whenever we were praying about where God would lead us, we knew God was going to lead us somewhere. We knew that our ministry in Florida had come to an end. We did not know exactly when we would be leaving, but we felt that the time was short. So we began, my family and I we began praying and researching and studying this country from top to bottom and from coast to coast. And we finally narrowed it down to 3 states. We narrowed it down to Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana. And then it was Idaho and Montana. And then it was Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, or Kalispell, Montana. So this was a city that we almost moved to. We thought very, very strongly about moving to Coeur d'Alene, but in the end, for a variety of reasons that you can read on my website if you go to Chuck Baldwin Live and look at the Montana Move page, we outline the various reasons that we moved to Kalispell. But this was a very, very strategic place, we thought, and still do. We just believe this entire mountain region of the Northwest is going to be a critical region in the months and years to come. Let me just kind of share a little bit with you. Since the last time we met, I was still in Florida, and the ministry there was ongoing, and this is our first time to see each other since our move. Our entire family moved to the Flathead. By that I mean our 3 children and their families, and my wife's parents. So a total of 5 distinct families, 18 people, all moved from the panhandle of Florida to the Flathead Valley of Montana. I've had a lot of people ask me how we like the area. It's impossible for me to describe how much I like Montana. The only thing that my prayer to the Lord has been, Lord, what took you so long to get me here? It's hard. It's really hard to describe the love and the affection that I have already for that area. It's beyond anything that I could have ever imagined. The people are absolutely wonderful for the most part. We have met some of the most wonderful, freedom-loving people. Our fellowship is not 501c3 tax deductible. And one of the things that I really had become convicted about was that issue. And I'm personally convinced, absolutely convinced, that the biggest reasons why our pastors are not addressing the salient issues affecting the freedoms and liberties of our country is because they are 501c3 tax exempt. They are scared to death of doing anything that might jeopardize their nonprofit tax exempt status. And for that, we have an anemic, weak, impotent pulpit in the United States today. And because of that, we have weak, impotent churches in our country. So when we moved and I left the ministry in Pensacola behind, and we started a fresh ministry in Kalispell, I determined that we would not seek nor ever be 501c3 tax exempt, and we are not and never will be. Now, all of the experts say that you cannot do that. Believe me, I know what they say. I've read the magazines and the periodicals. I've attended the meetings and the seminars and the webinars, and I've been in it all of my adult life. I know what they say. They say you cannot do that. They say people will not support with their tithes and offerings a ministry that they cannot claim as a tax deduction on their 501c3 giving. And therefore, you should not even consider that. Well, all I can tell you is we are now, whatever it is, 9 or 10 months into our ministry, and our church is growing, and people are financially supporting that ministry, not because they want something back from Uncle Sam at tax time, but because they believe in the message of freedom and truth that they hear every Sunday at Liberty Fellowship. And we have had many, many pastors around the country that have written us and have called us and are taking great encouragement by what they see happening. And many of them are writing me and asking me, how can we get out of the 501c3 tax exempt arena? How do we do this? And I have some friends that are able to kind of give them some guidance in that area. And so that part of it is just going extremely well. And I really pray that God will help us to kind of be a model for Christians and churches around the country and help them to understand that this intimidation that the IRS holds over God's churches around the country is not American, it is not biblical, and we are never going to have a spiritual renewal or revival until we come out of her, my people. I remember I wrote a column right after I made the public announcement that we were leaving and going to Montana, and I said something in the column that I kind of wish now I had not have said. You've never done that, I know, but I in anticipating the challenges that we knew were before us, I said something along the lines, we know that there will be challenges, we know that there will be trials, and I think the words I used were, let it come. I think Satan read my column. And he does not take challenges lightly. I can tell you, without sharing with you the grisly, gory details, what it has cost our family to make this move has been nothing short of horrific. We have lost almost everything. I could not, in my wildest imagination, have ever perceived from the direction that the opposition would come. We expect opposition from the leftists, the socialists, the big government types. And we have that enemy to face in Montana too. We're not exempt from that element. But we expect to do battle with people that we understand to be our enemies, politically, socially, etc. What makes it difficult, however, is whenever the enemy turns out to be one of us. I would remind you that the man who betrayed our Lord was not an outsider, he was an insider. He was one of the apostolate, one of the chosen 12. I have discovered in the last year that professing Christian people can be among the most evil, wicked, sinister people that walk on the planet. There is almost no end to what professing Christian people can do against their own. And in this regard, I want to make it very clear that I think it's important we understand that while we may disagree with one another on the nuances of the things that we believe are priority in our freedom movement, we need to be absolutely clear about one thing. We are either going to hang together, or we, as Ben Franklin said, are going to hang separately. We don't have to agree with one another on everything. I think it's important that we agree with one another on the main things. And we never want to sacrifice the principles that makes the Constitution Party what it is. One of the things that I was excited about in 2008 was I had the opportunity, in the absence of Ron Paul's candidacy in the GOP, I had the opportunity to kind of pick up where he left off on the national stage, such as it was, to be able to articulate those fundamental principles that we all, for the most part, hold dear. And let's be very clear. The thing that separates the Constitution Party from the Republican Party in one of the biggest areas of concern to all of us is in the area of foreign policy. If we do not change the direction of America's foreign policy, if we do not take our country out from under the clutches of these New World Order elites that use war and, as Daryl so brilliantly pointed out, death and famine and disease and pestilence as a vehicle, as a tool to strip the United States of its independence and of its freedoms and to ruin the independence movements in various countries around the world. If we do not come to grips with that, if we do not address that issue, then there is very little difference between our party and the two major parties. And that was one of the things that excited me about the campaign in 2008, and I trust that it will be something that will excite you in 2012 as you select your nominee for our party. That you recognize that we must be able to distinguish that difference from the two major parties in the foreign policy arena. When you look at the major candidates, with the exception of Ron Paul, they are all articulating the New World Order globalist agenda. Not one of them will change the direction of America's foreign policy. And I really believe that that is the heart and the soul of what is killing us as a nation at the national level. It's not the domestic issues, it is the foreign policy issues that are going to either make or break our nation as a country. So I just caution you, let's be sure that we don't devour our own. Let's be sure that we stand together on these crucial issues that this party is founded upon. We all know what those issues are. Because I found out that among the professing Christians today are really two groups. There are those who are freedomists, those who understand constitutionalism, federalism, liberty. And then there are statists. But they both profess to be Christians. But I want to tell you, I can tell you not only theoretically, but I can tell you experientially, that not all Christians are our friends. And not all unbelievers are our enemies. Amen. We have several non-believers that attend Liberty Fellowship every Sunday. As a minister of the gospel, I don't think this is going to be hyperbole when I tell you that there are probably more atheists and agnostics who watch us as we broadcast our messages Sunday by Sunday from Liberty Fellowship than probably any preacher in America. I hear from them on a regular basis. They communicate with me often. And so many of them are listening and are actually being stirred by what they hear. I had a very intelligent, educated, agnostic college professor who wrote me about 2 weeks ago. And he said, "Chuck, I just want to tell you that you have totally and thoroughly screwed up my life's philosophy." He said, "I thought I had all you evangelical religious Christians pigeonholed perfectly." And he said, "I was able to put you in this box." And he said, "I just had fun poking holes in your your theology and your doctrine and your philosophies, etc., etc. He said, I knew you so well. He said, and all of a sudden you come along. And he said, you tell me that as a Christian, we should not be violating the Constitution of the United States and without a declaration of war, attacking, invading, and occupying foreign countries. He said, you tell me as an evangelical Christian that the most important element of public office is for a man or woman to uphold the Constitution of the United States. He said, now I want you to know I'm going to have to spend the next 6 months or more analyzing, reanalyzing, and redefining my life's position. I'll let you know how it comes out. Thanks for all the work that you've now created for me. How many times have I run across Christians who are angry at, and they're not just angry at me, they're angry at us. Because we refuse to go along with the status quo. We have refused to support a Republican candidate just because he is the lesser of two evils. Or as a friend of mine said one time, we don't have the lesser of two evils. What we have are the evil of two lessers. Chuck, you can't do that. You've just got to go along with it. I mean, after all, Romans 13 teaches that we're supposed to submit to the government, no matter how evil, vile, or wicked it may be. By the way, I preached a 4-part sermon series on the true meaning of Romans 13. It's on one DVD. You can go to my website and purchase a copy. I think it's $15, and you get all 4 of those messages on the true meaning of Romans 13. We go into the Old Testament, the New Testament, hundreds of scriptures, hundreds of quotations from the founding fathers, theologians, philosophers, etc. of history, and we prove unequivocally and absolutely that nowhere in the Word of God does the Lord expect that God's people should bow the knee to Caesar. Nowhere is that stated. Render unto God, therefore, the things that are God, and unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. But nowhere did Jesus say that we are to render unto Caesar the things that belong to God. But these statist Christians who are comfortable, who lack the energy and the inspiration, the invigorating fight for liberty is lacking in them. Maybe they have their own personal reason. Maybe they have a personal benefit. Maybe it's something else. But for whatever the reason may be, so many of these Christians who are more statist than they are Christians will oppose the freedom fight, will oppose the liberty movement, and they are. I'm reminded of what Jesus said when he was riding into Jerusalem on the foal of the ass. You know the story. These peasant disciples were putting palm leaves in front of the animal as he's walking down the path toward Jerusalem. The Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes were all incensed at what they saw going on, and they said to the Lord, why don't you rebuke your disciples? Tell them to shut up. This is an embarrassment to us. I mean, what kind of a parade is this? This doesn't make any sense. Please hush them. And you know what Jesus said? He said, if they hold their peace, the stones would cry out. Well, ladies and gentlemen, many of the covenant, the people of the covenant, many of the people of faith are holding their peace. They are not crying out. They are not the watchman on the wall. They are not speaking the truth of what needs to be said. And as a result, I believe the stones are crying out. If God can use Balaam's ass to preach the truth, He can use anybody to preach the truth. He doesn't need you or me. Problem is not that God needs us. The problem is we need God. It's always been that way. It will always be that way. So we made the decision to move, made the announcement. Everything was great. Everything was wonderful. Until about a week after we got there. And the attacks began. And they continue until this very hour. And financially, it has cost us more than I dare to even tell you. We found out that our enemy is very, very strong. He's very, very real. And he hates what we are doing. One of my attorney friends said to me after all of this hit the fan and it became obvious what we were going through, he said to me, Chuck, if you were looking for evidence to prove that what you were doing by moving to Montana was the right thing to do, he said, this is it. Because you can usually judge the rightness of your decision by the amount of opposition you get to it. If everything is going rosy and well, probably you're on the wrong path. But if you stirred up a hornet's nest of opposition, you're probably doing something right. So we went. We put out the notice. We let people know what God had led us to do, not knowing what anyone else would do or thinking that God may be thinking of something bigger than just us, but all of a sudden people began to come. And they're still coming. And I have discovered that there is still in the hearts and the minds of millions of Americans of all kinds, churchgoers, non-churchgoers, Christians, non-Christians, Mormons, Protestants, Catholics, non-believers, there is still in the hearts and minds of millions and millions of people in this country a love of liberty. It's still here. Not all will feel led of God to relocate anywhere, nor should they. God is bigger than me. He's bigger than you. He's bigger than my location and your location. And there's no question that what God is doing, He's doing in a lot of places, among a lot of people, in a lot of different ways. We're just one small part of what God is doing, not only around the country, but I believe around the world. We're getting correspondence from Europe and from Australia, a lot of people from Canada who are inspired and energized for the freedom fight, who see the handwriting on the wall. And I think we all recognize, every one of us, that things cannot continue as they are forever. This house of cards that has been built is going to come crashing down. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's only a matter of when, it's a matter of how severe, etc., but it's not a matter of if. We all know that. We all see that. And each of us in our own way are going to have to come to grips with what God would have us to do about that individually or as a family. But this freedom expression is beginning to materialize all over the United States in ways that, quite frankly, are really exciting. I had the opportunity, along with Howard, to speak at Ron Paul's event down in Reno just a couple of weeks ago. And man, was it ever refreshing to see the young people and the enthusiasm of the folks in that crowd. And I know that the mainstream media refuses to acknowledge it, that Ron Paul is even in the race. But I know what that feels like. Howard knows what that feels like. In 2008, Mary Starrett, who was working for us as our media liaison, was trying to get us on the national talk shows, of course, and she was talking to Fox News and the Glenn Beck people and the O'Reilly people and all those folks. None of them would have us on. She was talking to a producer at CNN, and it was a lady producer, and she told her, she said, "Meredith, I'd love to have Chuck on. He's got some great ideas. He's articulate, and I think the American people would love to hear some of the things he has to say, but I'm just going to be honest with you and tell you that we were told not to have Mr. Baldwin on CNN." A producer being told? Well, who told her? Well, she didn't say. But a few weeks later, Lou Dobbs had me on his show. And 6 months after that, Lou Dobbs was fired from CNN. But that's just a coincidence, right? So we all know that the propaganda media is not going to allow principled constitutionalists a platform and a forum to preach the message of liberty to the American people. We understand that. And as I said in 2008, and I'll still say it in 2011 and 12, the problem in America is not that the people of this country have rejected the message of liberty and constitutional government. The problem is they don't hear the message of liberty and constitutional government. And that is by purposeful design. So we made the move. I got to tell you, it's been exciting. We were only there a few weeks, and I was invited to speak at an event on a Tuesday night in the middle of January. Temperature was about 10 below zero outside at a local hotel conference center. Just got there. Over 500 people showed up. Spoke in Hamilton not too long ago, a little bitty town south of Missoula, just a little rural place. It was at the fairgrounds. My driver drove me in, and I saw all these cars, and I assumed that there was another event going on, and I said to my driver, I said, "Oh, there must be something else going on here." He said, "No, man, there's nothing else going on here." He said, "All these people are here to hear you." There were over 800 people in that building. And it looked to me like that at least half of them were all carrying open carry. And I said to myself, I know I'm home. Just to give you a little piece of trivial information here. Did you know that in the state of Montana, the average household in the state of Montana has 27 guns in it? Needless to say, there are not too many home invasions in the state of Montana. Isn't that right, Lisa? The freedom movement is alive and well. It is not dead. It is not organized, but it is very much alive. I was asked to participate in a brand new film that just was released a few weeks ago, and I haven't even seen the finished product yet. It's called Spoiler. Have any of you seen it yet? It's out You can order it. Go online, Google it up. The spoiler. I think it's just one word, spoiler. And I'm a featured personality in that presentation, along with several others. The whole focus of the film is to highlight the need for an independent party to compete with the two major parties at the national level. The idea being that the two major parties are, as we know and have known for a long time, like Pat Buchanan said back in '96, they're not two peas in the same pod, they're two wings of the same bird of prey. And we understand that. That's why it doesn't matter whether it's Mr. Obama or Mr. McCain or whether it's Mr. Bush or Al Gore who's in the White House. The overall direction of the country toward larger and larger government, more and more interventionism and globalism continues unabated. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether there's an R or a D behind your name. If you are a puppet for the New World Order, you will not do what needs to be done to bring liberty and freedom back to the American people. And people realize that this is becoming more and more problematic in our country. And that's why they are looking to alternative ideas, and that was the motivation behind this film. That's why they call it Spoiler. And I think the subtitle was something like How a Third Party Can Win, or something like that, in the United States. Like I said, I haven't seen the finished product, so I'm interested to see how it turned out. But the point is that there is in this country an evolving awareness of the ultimate demise of freedom and liberty. And you and I have seen this for many, many years, and some of you for many decades. Howard Phillips has been a visionary in this regard, a man far beyond his time. I remember listening to Howard Phillips when I was executive director of the Moral Majority for the state of Florida, and I was sitting in assemblages in the Bahamas, for example. I remember, I think it was the first time I heard Howard, and he was talking about the things that relate to international affairs, some of the things that we talk about here a lot, some of the things I've just skirted in this address to you, and the things that he was saying back in the 80s, everything he was saying then has or is materializing as we speak today. The things that he warned us of are the things that are happening today. Some of us were a little bit slower to come along to that understanding. Others of us have yet to come along, but are beginning to figure it out. But what I'm saying is, all over the United States, people are beginning to awaken to the reality that it's not enough that a person has an R or a D behind their name, or that they call themselves a conservative or a liberal. Conservatives can be just as problematic to the issues of freedom as liberals can be. And if we don't begin to elect, regardless of party affiliation, independent-minded people who have no loyalty or allegiance to any entity that is regional or globalistic, any national candidate who is afraid to come out and say the United Nations is an evil organization from which the Americas should withdraw does not deserve our support. Any candidate for national office who is not willing to say that the Federal Reserve should be abolished does not deserve our support. Any candidate for national office who's not willing to say the Patriot Act is an egregious abridgment on the Fourth Amendment rights guaranteed us by the Constitution of the United States does not deserve our support. And other than that, I think too, and one of the things that brought us to Montana was the increasing awareness that the further down the road toward socialism and globalism that our country goes, the more necessary it's going to be to have a community of like-minded patriots who are willing to fight and die shoulder to shoulder. And that, in all honesty and candor, was one of the motivations that led us to the Flathead Valley of Montana. When I had the privilege of speaking in that part of the country over the course of 2008 and 2009, which is on 4 separate occasions before we actually moved there, I sensed something and felt something that I hadn't felt in too many places. I sensed and felt a spirit of freedom and liberty that would not be compromised. And the more I got to know the people of that area, the more I realized that here were people that truly were willing to fight shoulder to shoulder with like-minded patriots at whatever the cost. And I was very attracted to that. Because I firmly believe, before all is said and done, that martyrdom will again return to the United States. No, let me rephrase what I just said. I think it already has returned to the United States. I know this is being taped, and I know this will be replayed and rebroadcast, and I will say it for the sake of those who are listening afterward. I am absolutely convinced that Sam and Vicki Weaver were murdered by the U.S. government. And those 2 federal agents, one a U.S. Marshal and one an FBI sharpshooter, should have been prosecuted for murder, and they should be paying the sentence of that prosecution today. But they are not. The state of Idaho, to its credit, did bring murder charges. I think actually manslaughter charges against Lon Haruchi, the FBI sharpshooter who killed Vicki Weaver. Those charges were later dropped. And the judge who superintended over that decision was a man by the name of Judge Lodge, who said in his ruling, and this is not a quote, but it's real close, he said the supremacy clause of the United States Constitution means that federal agents cannot be held accountable anything they do in the line of duty. The prosecutor was still determined to continue the prosecution against the agent, but then an election came up and the powers that be went into this area of Idaho, right in here where we are. The seat, I think the court was actually here in Coeur d'Alene. Campaigned heavily for the opponent running against that prosecutor, defeated them in the election, and the new prosecuting attorney for the area said it's not in the interest of the state of Idaho to pursue this prosecution, and the case was dismissed. Randy Weaver comes to Liberty Fellowship from time to time. Randy Weaver is a friend of mine, and I don't care who knows it. If you were to talk to Randy today, he would claim to not be a Christian. I have, by experience, discovered that a lot of people that I find in my foxhole are not Christians. And a lot of people that call themselves Christians are in the other foxhole shooting at me. And many of them are called doctors and reverends. I make no bones about it. I am a believer in the blood atonement of the Lord Jesus Christ. I am his disciple to the best of my ability. And I will march under his banner, so help me God, for the rest of my life. But I also am aware that as a nation, the political contract that protects my rights as a Christian is the same contract that protects the rights of every man and every woman in this nation, Christian or not. Mormons, Jehovah's Witness, Catholic, evangelical Christians, we are all Americans. And if we do not fight together as freedom-loving Americans for the fundamental principles of liberty upon which our country is built, we will not have a free country much longer. I will try to win my unbelieving friends to the Lord. I will try to convince my agnostic and atheist friends that they need Christ. I will do that individually. I will do that in my witness. I will do that in my prayer life. But if that agnostic, that atheist, that unbeliever, if he or she understands the fundamental principles, and many of them do, upon which liberty is founded, then they can ally with us and we with them in the freedom fight, and I will continue to do so. One of the things that I love about what I do now, being totally unencumbered with any semblance of government intimidation, not that that stopped me all that much before, but boy, I can just say anything and everything I want from the pulpit on Sunday, and I do. Isn't that right, Greg?
That's right. Amen.
And you know what's really exciting to me is that 99.9% of all the people out there that are in the Liberty Fellowship audience, they actually love it. And they don't look at me with that deer in the headlight kind of stare like, what in the world is our crazy pastor talking about today? So here we are. In the Mountain States, in the freedom fight, doing our best to serve our God and our nation and our state. I ask that as a party we not be discouraged. We all know money is tight. Many of you have sacrificed just to get here. Some of us are struggling more than others. Believe me, I know. It's easy to look at the circumstances and to think, you know, it's all over. Well, there are certain things about what's going on that need to be over. Is that true or not? There are a lot of things that need to be over. There are a lot of things that I pray every day. I hasten the day comes earlier that they are over. But it is not over for liberty. It is not over for freedom. As long as liberty and freedom burns in the heart of one of us, it is not over. And I want you to know that there are still a whole lot more than 7,000 who have not and never will bow the knee to Baal. They won't do it. How is it all going to shake down? What is God's overriding superintending plan for the United States? None of us know that. None of us know that. But I do believe God still has a remnant. I do believe that that remnant is very alive and very steadfast and convicted of wherein they stand. And I believe that that remnant will fight to the last breath for the principles of freedom and constitutionalism and the things that upon which this country was founded. I am convinced of that. And so while you may feel outnumbered, since when has God ever needed a majority to prevail? Matt Shea, who's going to speak to us here in just a moment, who is doing tremendous work in the Washington State Legislature. One of the really, really good guys. Can tell you that while we may be a minority, we are not impotent and we are not powerless. Our founding fathers were not a minority in 1775 and 6. We are not a minority today. But I still hold hope with that verse of Scripture. We can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. And that is good for today as it was 2,000 years ago. It's good for America as it was in New Testament times. Jim Clymer, I just want to say, while I have the podium, you have been a masterful chairman for our party. We could not had a better chairman to lead us through all these years of our party's history than Jim Clymer. And I thank you, Jim, personally, for your leadership and for your friendship. And I want to end by just saying to you, Constitution Party members and friends here this afternoon, I want to thank you again for the honor you bestowed on me in 2008. I want to thank you again for your prayers, for your friendship, for your love. Many of you have come up and asked about my wife, my family. I thank you for that. I thank you for what you're doing in your respective states and your respective cities and the fight in which you are engaged. And I pray that you will not be discouraged and that you will not be defeated and that you will not feel hopeless. I pray that you will understand that God still has a remnant and that God will still fight with those who fight for liberty. And let's let God do whatever He's going to do. And in the meantime, let us be prepared emotionally, physically, spiritually, in every other way. Prepared to be faithful unto death for the principles that we know are sacred and right. And I pledge to you my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. And I will, shoulder to shoulder, with you who are in the fight for liberty, fight with you. And I thank you so much for the privilege of being part of this great party, for the privilege of being your nominee in 2008, and for being your friend. Thank you very much.